guys, welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here, hello, hi, my name is Jyotsna and wishing you a very happy World Book Day. So basically we are following tradition right now because every year on World Book Day, that is 23rd April, I give you 23 book recommendations, and this is a very particularly exciting video for me because of course it's a new setup. As you can see, the background is different, and also I have 23 books for you, 23 prompts for you. Some of these are books that I read recently and I really wanted to recommend. Some of these books are some things that I've already recommended as a part of my end of the year series. But this is an exciting video. All the prompts are in the description box. Let's jump right into it. So starting with my favorite section, the next few prompts are going to be about non-fiction reads. And let me start with my favorite international non-fiction read that I recommend. So for me, this has to be Say Nothing by Patrick Radden Keefe. Now, I do not think I've recommended this book earlier in any of my videos, but then recently I was reading a book for the BookTube Prize which talks about Irish history, and that's when I suddenly remembered the impact that IRA had not only on Ireland or the UK in general, but on European politics in general. So I think that was an eye-opener in general, and this is a good book to understand what the IRA is, what the IRA was, if you're interested in Irish history. For me, this was like an introduction to Irish history in general. I did not know about the IRA. They don't teach you these things in Indian schools, of course, and with a good reason, because it's really not relatable. But then it's interesting to see how the world has been shaped because of the atrocities or the movement that the IRA had. I do recommend this. I would say if you can do audio on this, I recommend an audio on this because it's a nice audiobook as well. And the reason I love Patrick Radden Keefe is because he does his research before writing his books, right? Be it any of his other books, he knows his subject matter in and out, and there's a lot of investigation that goes into his subject matters before he actually sits and writes the book, and I absolutely love that aspect of it, and that's why I recommend Say Nothing. Now, just like an international non-fiction book which has investigative elements, the next prompt is an investigative non-fiction book which is set in India. And for this, I have to recommend Bottle of Lies by Catherine Eban, which is a brilliant investigation into the generic drug industry. I have spoken about this book before on my channel. If you've not watched the non-fiction recommendations video, it's down below. But this particular book is an eye-opener when it comes to the generic pharma industry. This book especially explores Ranbaxy and all the fraud and all the scams that they did, manipulating data and things like that, just to get their drugs sold in third-party markets and international markets, right? So very interesting read, amazing investigative journalism, and of course it kind of talks about all of the stuff, the dark and the evil side of the pharma industry, which is supposed to save lives. Then the third prompt is an Indian non-fiction book that I recommend, and this is not necessarily investigative journalism. This is just like a random Indian non-fiction book that I wanted to put in this list and I really want to recommend, and that is Desperately Seeking Shahrukh by Shrayana Bhattacharya. And I might have spoken about this book before, I might have not spoken about this book before, but recently I got a chance to also meet the author, so here's a picture. But the point being is that I really wanted to recommend this book because it talks about the economics of Indian women, or the economic status of Indian women through Shah Rukh Khan fans. And for me, it was a very unique read because I read this as a part of my group read, which is called On Reading Nonfiction, where we read this as a group and we discussed it last year. And it was a very interesting read. Like, I do have like two criticisms of the book, honestly, and there were parts in the book that I felt were not up to the mark, but honestly I can overlook all of this for the effect that the book had on me, because it made me realize so much about India, so much about Bollywood in general, and how Shah Rukh Khan is like this epitome of romance for a lot of young Indians like me as well, because although I'm not a Shah Rukh Khan fan, I grew up watching a lot of his movies, and those do form like your epitome or your idea of romance. Like Shah Rukh Khan gives you that idea of romance. So it's interesting. It's a very interesting survey as well, I would say, because she was working with some agency who was doing a survey or economic survey, and the author, being a Shah Rukh Khan fan herself, decided that she has to do it. So again, if you're a Shah Rukh Khan fan, this is a must read, first thing. Second thing, if you really want to know about the economic status of women in India, this is a book that I highly recommend. Now, the fourth prompt is where we start with some other fictional and prompts other than non-fiction, to be honest. So the fourth prompt is a satire that I recommend, and for me a satire that I recommend is Glory by No Violet Bulawayo, which is kind of based in a fictional country called Jidada, loosely based on Zimbabwe. This book is written very much inspired by Animal Farm for sure, but also it has a lot of other elements that it gets in, including dictatorship, a country, why is it so underdeveloped because of the leadership, why the economic condition of a country is bad, and things like that. And also it talks about a lot of ethnic cleansing and things like that that are going on in the world today. Very interesting read. I did think that this book is a tad bit long because I really wanted to get to the end of it, but honestly at the end of it I was really happy and I really liked the way the book was written. So I highly recommend this if you're looking for satire or if you are a fan of Animal Farm. So coming to the fifth prompt, and this is a no-brain thriller recommendation, and for me this has to be a person that I discovered just last year, yes, late to the party, and that's Lucy Foley. I absolutely loved The Guest List by Lucy Foley, and if you're looking for some light reads or thrilling reads, I did this on audio and it really helped me get over my reading slump, and I love the mystery factor of it as well. Loved it so much, absolutely recommend it as well. It's like a no-brain thriller read, whodunit read, really replaces your, I think Lucy Foley is more like a modern day Agatha Christie and things like that. So recommend it for sure. Maybe read it, maybe not, your choice. But yeah, it helped me get over my reading slump. Coming to the next prompt, and that is a book about war. And the reason I felt like I have to keep this prompt in this particular video is because I wanted to first thing discuss this gem, and second thing is very, very, very relevant in today's world, because we are seeing a lot of war-like situations in this particular generation. We are seeing a lot of wars in general, and the book that I want to recommend for this prompt is Black Butterflies by Priscilla Morris, which at this point of time has been longlisted for the Women's Prize, and I'm hoping it gets shortlisted really. This book is about the Bosnian War in the early 90s, 92 to 95. That's when the war actually ran. Those are the years when the war actually ran, where the Serbian army attacked Bosnia, and there was an ethnic cleansing of Bosnian Muslims as well. So this book basically talks about what happens in a war, what happens when you're stuck in a war-torn country, and it also talks about we think that escaping a war-torn country is easy, but it's not at all easy, because there are a lot of there's a lot of evil forces at work in general. There are checkpoints set up, water is cut, there is no food available. UN will have to come to your city to give you food because you're in a war-torn nation and things like that. And I think this is an eye-opener which talks about why war is very detrimental to the society, to people in general, and it totally just sucks. Okay, so highly recommend this book. It's thinking about it only gives me goosebumps, because this is one of my best reads of 2023. I recommend it. Please read it. Then the seventh prompt is again about something that's related to this theme, and that is a book about refugees. And the refugee crisis in this world. And I have read multiple books, in the past 1 year of regarding refugees, and be it fiction or non-fiction. But for this one, I want to give you like a fictional recommendation, and that is Wandering Souls by Cecile Pin. Now, this is again something from the Women's Prize long list, and I highly recommend this because this is about the Vietnamese boat people. The author's mother was a Vietnamese boat person who actually came via boat all the way from Vietnam to, I would say, UK, with like a small stopover at Hong Kong or somewhere in China. And it actually talks about the lives of refugees, how they try to integrate into society post being granted refugee status in a Western country. It talks about their struggles, their cultural differences, the dangers that they undergo while going to a particular country in that port, while escaping their own country, and the atrocities that are happening in their own country. I highly recommend this book. It's something that really made my hair at the back of my neck stand up, because this is the, I would say, sad life of refugees. Like, you cannot control where you're being born, right? You might be born in a very nice country with a good regime. You might be born in a very bad country with no food, a lot of famine and things like that, and all of those things. So yeah, highly recommend this book. I hope you read it. It's a short book as well, to be honest. Like, I think it's more like a novella rather than a book. But yes, I do recommend it for sure. And then coming to more lighter things, I mean, light is a very relative word, but the next prompt is a memoir that I recommend. And a memoir that I highly recommend, and I think you should read it on audio because it's the author who narrates it, and that is I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy. And this book is about a child TV star who gets put into the spotlight by her mother, although she does not want to. She does not have free will in this thing because she needs to feed her family and things like that, and how her mother manipulated her emotionally and physically as well. A lot of mental health problems that the author has today is because of her mother, and it's just that it's very sad. It's extremely sad, and some people don't deserve to be parents. That's what it teaches you. I highly recommend this book. I think it'll be eye-opening on some level, which talks about trauma, childhood trauma, and especially trauma which is pushed into you because of bad parents. And yeah, this is the book I recommend for sure. Then the next prompt that I have here, and that is the ninth prompt, is a slow burn read. And when I say a slow burn read, it's a book that you will take some time to get into, but once you get into it, you are in it for life. You will love it after reading it as well. And for me, this has to be Middlesex by Jeffrey Eugenides, which actually won the Pulitzer, I think, in the yesteryears or something. But absolutely brilliant book. It is a book with LGBTQ themes because this particular person has been born with the genitalia, with the male and female genitalia, and it's about their life. And the book is funny, it's very witty, it talks about their status because they were brought up as a woman, right? Because that would have been the visible genitalia to the doctors and the parents, but later on in life they decide to become a man, and it is their story, and that's why the book is called Middlesex. Highly recommended. I suggest that you read it in June, which is the LGBTQ reading month or history month, whatever you call it. Recommend it. Please read it for sure. 10th prompt that I have for you is a book series that you absolutely loved and would like to recommend. And for me, the book series has to be the Wolf Hall trilogy. Yes, absolutely brilliant. Rest in peace, Hilary Mantel, but you have gifted us with an amazing book series of regarding Thomas Cromwell in Henry VIII's court. Such a finicky asshole, the Henry VIII was. So amazing read, lovely. I had already read the first two books before, but the second book the third book that is Mirror in the Light, I had just finished it last year. and I cannot recommend it enough. If you get a chance to read this, of course, you need to invest some time because these books are huge. But once you read them, I think life would be different for you, and you will look at the author as well in a different light. And again, so sad that we lost Hilary Mantel last year, honestly, but an amazing author, remembered for sure for her work. So the 11th prompt is a book about natural disasters, and the reason I felt like this prompt is very important to be added in a list like this is because we are talking about a lot of environmental issues, and we've been talking about them in the recent years. And one of such natural disasters that led to an environmental I would say disaster was the Japanese tsunami in 2011. And the book I want to recommend is Ghost of the Tsunami by Patty. I don't remember the author's name, but yeah, it's here. And the author is actually a correspondent, a journalist, and he speaks like fluent Japanese and things like that. And this book mainly concentrates on the tsunami when it affected this area in Japan called Osaka, and where a lot of kids died for no fault of theirs. It talks about a lot about the natural disasters, the grieving process that the parents had, and it talks about how can you avoid the loss of human life in a disaster like this, because honestly, at least the death of these children were linked to human errors. And that's why it makes sense, because natural disasters can strike anytime, but it's like the survival ability of the entire situation, because Japan, like that, is prone to earthquakes, is prone to tsunamis, but something went wrong and these kids died. So I do recommend it. It is a sad book. Trigger warning: there's death, there's parental grievance, and there's a lot of discussion about death without your own fault. Like, there was no fault of yours and still you died. So yeah, trigger warning on that. So moving to the next prompt, and I feel that this is a bit more of a curiosity for me. That is, the prompt is a book about death. And for me, death is a very interesting topic. I research a lot on it because I'm obsessed with it for some reason. Like, don't ask me why, but I think dealing with death is one of humanity's most difficult emotions. Grieving is one of humanity's more difficult emotions, and that's why this book called Personal Effects is a brilliant read on how to deal with the next of kin in case of a plane crash, in case of a terrorist attack. So the author has been in the industry of dealing with the dead, ensuring that remains are sent back to the home country. In this case, it's the US, or soldiers are sent back home and things like that. Or in case of a terrorist attack, you get the bodies of the respective nationalities and send them back home, right? And it clearly talks about how you need to have no emotions doing this particular job. It's eye-opening, it's interesting. I won't say it's triggering. I mean, if you talk about a plane crash or a terrorist attack, it is very triggering in that sense. But the author has a very calm demeanor in explaining how he deals with next of kin, how he deals with the grieving relatives and family members who come to like a community center to know more about their the plane crash or how did it happen and things like that. So very interesting read. Basically the tagline is how to care for the living by caring for the dead, because you cannot do anything more for the dead person. The dead person is dead, but what you can do is how you deal with the living so that their sadness or their grievances or whatever grief they're going through, to be honest, is reduced. Then let's come to more lighter prompts, because yeah, enough of death and natural disasters. And the 13th prompt in the list is a book in translation, and for me this has to be Heaven by Mieko Kawakami, correct? And this is again translated from Japanese. Honestly, I would say I did like this book a lot. Like, it was a 4 stars for me, and it introduced me to a part of Japanese literature that you generally don't read, because mainstream Japanese literature is Kiego Higashino or Haruki Murakami and things like that. But I absolutely love this author and her way of thinking. Of course, the trigger warning for this book is bullying, because for me it was a huge trigger warning because I've been bullied in school. And again, like, the story is about these two outcasts, like this outcast boy and this outcast girl, both of them bullied by male and female classmates respectively. Interesting book, talks about the dynamics of school kids. It's a dark book as well. I really like it a lot. So yeah, I do recommend this book for sure. And then moving on to the next prompt, and that is a graphic novel that I recommend. And a graphic novel recommendation from my side would be They Called Us Enemy. And this is actually a book written by George Takei, who as a child was imprisoned, I would say, or sent to a Japanese concentration camp during World War II. And my interest in this book sparked because of another book that I was reading called Facing the Mountain. And this being a graphic novel, it is a much easier subject to digest, although it's sad. The artwork is good and everything, and it's easy to get into the topic so that you can read more about it. During World War II, when Japan entered the war, a lot of Japanese Americans, in this case the Issei and the Nisei, George Takei being a Nisei, that is an American born Japanese person, they were sent to concentration camps, right? And I think that considering they were sent to concentration camps, it just fueled the enmity, the racism, because the American government was very racist, because they were very suspicious of their Japanese ancestral citizens. Talks about the horrors, talks about all of the things that his family had to go through in these camps, in these really shanty and shabby camps. I do recommend this for sure. I like the artwork, of course. The story has been told by George Takei, but there are other people who've done the artwork. So yeah, a good graphic novel recommendation. Getting to the fifth prompt in this particular list, and it has to be something that's very close to my heart, and that is a partition recommendation. Now, if you do not know, every July and August I read a lot of books surrounding the Indian independence movement, and also regarding the partition, everything that happened pre-1947 and somewhere in 1947, 1950s. And this time also I am going to be doing the same, so you can follow or subscribe to follow on that journey with me. But the thing is that the book I want to recommend, yes, so the book, oh my god, I just lost track of the book. The book I want to recommend as a part of the partition recommendation is In the Language of Remembering by Anjal Malhotra. And of course, I got a chance to meet her recently. The pictures here, I think you must have seen it already when I was discussing Shrayana Bhattacharya's book. But this book is like a follow-up to her first book, that's Remnants of a Separation. Remnants of a Separation is a book that you have to read before you get into this book, I feel, because this book talks about the generational trauma of the partition. It interviews the second generation and the third generation of those who of the kids of those who endured the partition. It is a super interesting and an eye-opening read as well, because honestly, when you talk about generational trauma books or anything of that sort, it's generally associated with the Holocaust, and never has there been a book about the partition which encompasses the generational trauma. So yeah, this is a book I highly recommend, but I still say that you should read the first book and then get to this book. Then coming to the 16th prompt, and that is an audiobook recommendation. I do much of my reading on audiobooks because first, it is portable, second, it is not like time consuming because I can read it anytime, anywhere, in the cab, doing dishes, whatever it is. And for me, this has to be My Fourth Time We Drowned by Sally Hayden. And this is a book about the refugee crisis in especially in Africa, in Northern Africa, and how the European Union has put up gates at their borders, not allowing refugees to come in. Now, this is a book that I highly recommend you read on audio. Again, it's triggering because there are voice messages that were sent by these refugees in these Libyan concentration camps to the author, and she's put them in the audiobook. And I think that's brilliant because it just makes you realize the effect that all the torture and the violence has on these refugees. They're just trying to find a normal life, to be honest, but it's just that heartbreaking. It is just very I would say, like, heartbreaking is the word. Like, thinking about those voice messages, I just feel very, very, very sad. Okay, so I highly recommend this book on audio. Again, there are trigger warnings associated with this one as well, including torture and concentration camps and things like that. So yeah, tread carefully. So we are done with 16 prompts now. So moving on to the 17th prompt, and that is a translation recommendation. Okay, a book that has been translated. So for me, this has to be a book that's there on my shelf, but it's about, because I'm done reading it, and that is The Greatest Bengali Stories Ever Told, translated and edited by Arunabha Sinha. Now, honestly, I was looking forward to read this book for a very long time, but I couldn't because of a lot of other reading commitments. But now that I've read this book, I really want to read the entire series that Aleph has released with respect to the greatest stories in all the regional languages. And if you ask me, the reason I love this book is because from my personal interaction with someone who has been born and brought up in Calcutta, they have actually learned these stories from they were very little all the way till graduation. And I think for me that is very enlightening, because this is like a crash course into regional literature, or in this case Bengali literature. It's like crash course 101, and helps you get a lot of insight on regional literature in general. So yeah, this is just the start. I would want to read the other books as well in this particular series, and then get back to you and recommend you more books. So getting to I would say it's the 18th prompt, right? Yeah. So getting to the next prompt, and again, this is a much more lighter prompt, and it's a fantasy read that I recommend. Now, honestly, I am not a fantasy person, but when I read fantasy, there are some good books that I tend to read when it comes to fantasy. And for a fantasy read, and this was a light read for me, I recommend Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. The author is a very famous audiobook narrator, and this particular book is simply about a coffee shop and some treats in a coffee shop and a number of people in the coffee shop and things like that. So it's a very cozy read, it's a very nice read, and it's fantasy as well, because our protagonist is actually establishing a coffee shop in a city which has never heard of coffee. So interesting read. I recommend it as a light read. It was a very quick read for me. And talking about the 19th prompt in this list, and that is a BIPOC book recommendation. And a BIPOC book recommendation that I think that you should read would be How the Word is Passed by Clint Smith, and it basically talks about the history of slavery in the US. Now, the reason I like this book a lot, because Clint Smith actually tries to understand conservatism in the US, specifically with respect to Black Lives Matter and all the movements in order to ensure equal rights. And it talks about how a lot of famous American politicians way back had slaves. Yeah, I know. So it's an interesting read, it's an eye-opening read, and I think reading this makes you realize a lot about the world in general, the hypocrisy, and a lot of it can also be transferred to a lot of other countries and India as well. So again, I love this read. It is a good BIPOC recommendation for me, and I hope you read it as well. And then we have 4 more prompts to go only, and the 20th prompt in the list is a book on art. And the reason why I wanted to introduce this particular prompt in this list is because I am on a mission to read more books with art in it, related to art in general, right? And a book that I want to recommend is Chasing Me to My Grave by Wilfred Rembert. I think that's his name. And he was a very, very unique artist, right? Because so basically this is his memoir, and it talks about like the civil rights movement and how he was imprisoned, and there was a time he was also like lynched by a mob, and all of these experiences that he's had all of them have been translated into a canvas, and his canvas is actually leather. He basically makes etched leather works and paints them, and all of them are very much inspired by his own life, his own upbringing in general. Like, he also has experiences working in cotton fields in the southern part of the United States. So, interesting book. I do recommend this book, not for the subject matter, but instead for the art. If you get hands on this book anyhow, I want you to flip through the pages and look at the artworks that he's done, because when I started reading the book and there were artworks in the middle, I was like, okay, this is a very unique form of impressionist painting. But then it's later on when he tells that I learned how to work on leather in jail. That's when it completely like changed my perspective, because all of those artworks that I was looking at in that book were on leather, and they were like etched in leather. So it takes time for him to make an artwork like that. So yeah, highly recommend this book for art lovers and for artists in general. Then the 21st book that I want to recommend, and the prompt is a Women's Prize nominated book. And again, the Women's Prize is very close to my heart. I read it every year. I at least read the entire shortlist every year, when considering I start with the long list once the long list is announced. And for me, this has to be Sorrow and Bliss by Meg Mason. And I think most of you must have read this book by now, because this has been highly recommended in a lot of reading circles. But I want to also recommend this because it talks about a mental health crisis, and this book is written from the POV of someone who's suffering from mental health issues, and how they see the world around them, and how there are people around them who take care of them in a certain way because of their issues, you know. So for some it might be relatable, for some it might be a calling out moment, but honestly it is like an eye-opening and a heartbreaking and a relatable piece of work. Honestly, should have won the Women's Prize on some level, maybe not, but I still recommend it nevertheless, because this is an important book to read. Now we get to the last two prompts, and the 22nd prompt in this particular list is a book about family. And I think this is also a new prompt that I've introduced into this list of prompts, because one of the biggest things that I've realized that I've been doing recently is reading a lot about family in general, be it in the form of refugees, be it in the form of, anything else. Like, it's about families, it's about dysfunctional families, maybe functional families, and things like that. And a book that I want to recommend, which is based on an entire family, is Infinite Country by Patricia Engel. Now, you might have read this book because it's a short novella, but if you've not read it, I recommend that you read it. If you're if you're looking out for reading books that are more related to family, or something about family sagas and things like that. Although this is not a saga, but this is a story of a family that is divided between continents, like one in South America and one in North America. And it kind of talks about how painful the separation is because of legal issues, because of deportation laws and things like that. And it talks about how they see each other, or how they expect the other person would be, with the limited phone calls flowing between them. Now, of course, no spoilers here, but again, it's a short read. It was like a 5-hour audiobook, to be honest, and I recommend that you read it, because if I think the ending would be something that you would not expect, and something that you would be looking forward to. I absolutely like this book a lot, and I do recommend it. And that gets me to the last prompt in this entire list, and the last prompt in this list is a short story read. And I have to recommend short story reads, because for me, short story reads are those that help me cleanse my palate after like a heavy book. And in this case, the book that helped me cleanse my palette recently was Birthday Stories by Haruki Murakami. Now, I won't say that this is the best short story book out there, of course not, but then it has some really very good stories about people on their birthdays. And even the idea of the book was when Murakami turned, I think, what, like some age he turned, and then the radio was announcing saying that, oh, it's Haruki Murakami's birthday, and then he suddenly got the idea. Like, I think that we should collect stories from various authors of people on their birthdays, and these are mainly fictional stories written by authors and favorite authors of Murakami. Although I'm not a huge Murakami fan, but I really like this book a lot because of its collection of short stories. So yeah, I recommend it for sure. So yeah, that's it. That's it for this particular video. And honestly, you know, a lot of things have been going on recently, and I just want to like give a shout out to Prashant, who is a friend slash an acquaintance of mine, and his video is down in the description box, a TED talk that you might want to watch. And I think that TED talk kind of, you know, the reason I'm mentioning it here is because it was kind of relatable in the sense that the way we think about reading, the way we think about the world, and everything gets encompassed in like one TED talk, and that's why I wanted to put it here. Go ahead, check it out. But otherwise, I'm wishing you a happy World Book Day. I hope these recommendations have made your day. You've taken something back, and if you want to recommend something more, please use the comment section and do that. Okay, so thank you so much for watching this video. I'll see you in my next one. Bye.